Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om, Om, Om. Om Gurudev. Welcome everybody to this class series that we're going to do on the topic of calmness. And I've titled it, Calmness is the Doorway to Inner Freedom. And it's going to be just a few classes. And I'd like to mention how this came to me to do this class and how this arose in my mind. It was a while back, I was doing a Kriya initiation ceremony, and somebody had, in the question and answer and the discussion afterwards, somebody had mentioned that, oh, I'm so glad, I love to do Kriya because when I'm restless and I'm preoccupied, I meditate and I do Kriya and it makes me calm. And no doubt, that's true. And I think all of us who are meditators or perhaps Kriya bonds, I think all of us have experienced that. But there was another point I made. I said, in a sense, we become calm, yes, but it takes calmness to actually go deep into Kriya. And people approach calmness as just something, it's a little bit passive, and it's one of those qualities that people want, and it's kind of thought of as very relaxing and very pleasant, but as a result of something. But it's actually more than that. It's because I'm not denying that, and we've all experienced that. But in my mind, I felt that people were not taking it seriously enough, that it actually is a vital necessity if we're going to be able to experience deeper states of meditation. And I was speaking here to a group of people that are experienced meditators, and it was with that thought that I proceeded. But then I realized, I think many people, even beginner meditators, they tend to approach it in a passive manner and not realizing that it is actually a vital, if perhaps even you could say the vital step to be able to go deep into our meditation. And yes, we have to have a lot of their other qualities. And, if I'm giving a Kriya ceremony, I'll mention becoming calm, inwardly calm, and the need for devotion, the need for commitment, and et cetera, et cetera. And all of those are absolutely necessary. But let's not overlook this one quality. And I think when we study and prepare for Kriya Yoga, when we prepare to go deeper, we study yoga and we go over the yamas and niyamas, and we come in our pursuit of being disciples in this path, the Paramhansa Yogananda, we realize that he gives us a definition of yoga is one-pointed meditation on God or one of his aspects. Now, of course, that leads to a discussion of what are the aspects of God, and there's the 8 main aspects, which I'm going to cover here in a little bit. And it's focusing on those aspects, but to be able to go into those deeper aspects, to be able to experience them, it's impossible to do so if we're not calm. And so you could say, and it's been my experience of meditating for well over 50 years now, practicing Kriya for that long as well, that without calmness, you could say we're a beginner. If we approach with our meditation, beginners approach it with the thought of, oh, I'm going to meditate and I'll get calm. And that's their goal. But when they think of calmness in that way, it's just something of a mild state of relaxation. But it's much, much more than that. And a more experienced person comes to the realization that if I want to go deep in my practices, I must become calm first. I become calm first. And of course, they go hand in hand. As we go deeper, we become calmer. As we become calmer, we go deeper. So it's this doorway that we need to go through, calmness, in order to experience those divine states, those aspects of God we talk about, of light and sound and love and joy and bliss. These sorts of things, they come, power, they come through increasing amounts of calmness, and of course they do lead to that as well. So I'm going to refer to my notes here, which has, so if I'm looking down at them, please don't get distracted here, but because there are, as we know, there are 8 aspects, and I want to cover each of those. But before I do, I want to also mention that the quality of calmness is something that is perhaps the most practical things, one of the most practical things we can possibly do in order to be effective in life. And of course, if you're in a position of leadership, you have to be able to maintain a sense of calm in order to be able to project your authority and present your ideas. You have to be able to maintain your composure under stressful situation. You know, if you lose your head and you're supposed to be in charge, it certainly is going to be ineffective. You have to be able to be calm, to be able to think clearly, to make proper decisions. You have to be effectively to navigate stressful situations. And just in our home environment, if you're a mother, a father, and you have a child who's in a tantrum, are you going to lose your center in the midst of that tantrum and react to that? No. You have to maintain your center. And that's what calmness is about. It's about maintaining our center in the midst of this worldly environment, the stresses and the challenges of life that are always pulling us out into getting involved in this or that. And so, and losing that center. And so the question is going to be then, how do we maintain that center? And so I want to divide this up into 2 parts. And of course, as we go along, if you have questions, please do put them in the chat box. And I'm going to address the first part of just what is calmness? Why is calmness important, and how it fits into our spiritual life? And then, of course, the obvious second question, the second part is which I'll address more in next week's class, is how do we get calm? What do we do? How can I take the next steps in order to be effective in becoming calm? And I know speaking from my own personal experience, you might say this is in my journey, in my spiritual practice, is I don't think I was born calm, but I think I have developed some calmness along the way. And as that calmness has come into my disposition a little bit, meaning, not being pulled off center, I found that my meditation practice and my Kriya practice has improved too. And I've seen the need for it. And it's a very subtle, it's a subtle thing. And I personally have not actually addressed the topic too much other than superficially. And so that Kriya initiation and those questions, I began to think about it. I should. And so that's what we'll do today. Now, let me go, why do we need to be calm? And as I mentioned, I wanted to mention Yogananda's definition here of meditation. He said meditation is one pointed concentration upon God, or one of his aspects. Because what is God anyway? God is this infinity. How do we even conceive of infinity? And so in a sense we have to, how does that infinity express itself? And it's through the various aspects. And so you could take the various aspects, let's say take the first 2 that come to mind. One is wisdom and love. How can we possibly discriminate, which is at the basis, one of the basis of wisdom? How can we discriminate? In other words, make decisions, see things in proportion if we're not calm, if our mind is restless? And what is the lack of calmness? You could say this, we live in a world of duality, and it's like the storm-tossed sea that's up and down all of these waves. how does, Patanjali define yoga? Yoga is the neutralization of the waves or the fluctuations of chitta, the likes and dislikes, the state of chitta being that state of consciousness of inner feeling of that makes us human. The waves of consciousness, and that's often defined that way. The waves of thought and consciousness of feeling. And waves, of course, mean there's up and down like a storm. And what we're trying to do, and it's often used as image in when we teach people to meditate. Some of your meditation teachers have visualized a lake, moon shining on the lake, and the reflection of the lake is all disturbed because of the waves on that lake. And let's try to calm those down. Well, obviously, the wisdom aspect of God, the ability to discriminate properly, to be able to have that intuition functioning, is to see truth as it is and not through the lens of distorted duality. We have to become still. That lake has to become still. The mind has to become still. And you could say duality itself is the very definition of restlessness and it is of uncalmness. And you could say uncalmness, restlessness, is the opposite of what we're trying to achieve when we practice yoga. And so we have to, the wisdom represents, is the definition here, the wisdom aspect of God represents the insight that transcends intellectual knowledge. This is Swamiji's definition. Wisdom involves perceiving the world and life from a divine perspective. And how is that possible without calm and inner perception? In order to see life as it is, undistorted. In other words, not all of the distortion, like one of those crazy mirrors you look in and it distorts your reflection. To be able to see it clearly, we have to have that calmness. Now, that inner calmness, and of course, inner calmness has to, you could say, be a result to some degree of outer calmness, but it doesn't necessarily correlate with outer calmness because it's not passive. Inner calmness is dynamic. And there was a story once of Master Yogananda, who was late for a lecture, and he had to run to get there on time. So he said that, and somebody saw him. He says, "Don't be nervous, Master," because Master was running. He was going to be late. "Don't be nervous, Master." And Master, he says, "One can run calmly or one can run nervously, but not to run when you're late is to be lazy." So you could see here it's not about how your outward appearance might be or what you might have to do outwardly. It's that inward state of stillness, being centered, not losing in the fluctuations of duality. And there's the basic difference between seeing life in the non-dualistic way. And so what about now? Often these 8 aspects are paired. We have wisdom and what you might say it's partner, wisdom and love, because the mind and the intellect, and we have the heart. And of course, you could say love is pure love is likewise, or the opposite of pure love is disturbed, emotion versus devotion. True devotion is from a center of calmness, and oftentimes people will think, "Oh, if I'm devotional, I'm singing, I'm dancing, I'm expressing it." But much of that is when it's outward, and of course, it's sometimes helpful to be devotionally outward in your devotion, because it gets the energy moving, it gets it expressive, it gets the heart's feelings to express. But in time, the true devotion comes when you can go beyond that to that inner stillness of pure feeling of love for God. Whereas when it's emotional, it's always outward. And if you see somebody highly emotionally expressive, they're not truly inwardly focused. It's when we can go beyond that we become still and inwardly, but yet that is again not passive. The heart's feelings are still in their one-pointed devotion toward God and giving of self-offering of oneself for God, when it becomes very calm. Now that calmness, when it's absent, you could say that's when we do it. We go into motion. So pure love, central to the spiritual path, and as Swami Sri Yukteswar reminds us, we cannot take one step in our spiritual progress without awakening the heart's natural love, and that's calm. That's calm. It's not emotionally outward in that way. Now the other two aspects, we have light and we have sound. Why? One of the things if you're a Kriya Bon, you have at some point along the journey learned about the inner sounds, the sounds that are there right behind our surface consciousness. And we teach the Om technique, which is learning to listen to those inner sounds. And what is the major complaint? Well, I don't hear any inner sounds. I don't hear any Om sound. And it becomes a frustrating technique to practice because we can't hear. And why can't we hear? Because we hear everything else is making noise. And what is noise? It's vibration. What is vibration? It's the up and down. It's this disturbance. Now, the only way that we're going to be able to transcend that, accepting God's grace, of course, because the moments of grace come to everybody, restless and the calm. But to transcend that consciously, purposefully, we have to be able to reduce that vibrational disturbance of the physical body, restlessness of the body. I can't meditate, I'm fidgety, the body, and the mind cannot slow down. The waves of feeling, emotions can't slow down. Nothing can slow down. And when they have those waves, they're creating an inner disturbance of that you could say blocks the ability to hear that Om sound that's behind all of that. And so that too it has its own, you could say it's cosmic vibration. But the worldly vibrations are going to block it until we become calm. And so calming is the body, of course, but it's also that the inner disturbances of the mind and the inner disturbances of the feelings and I'll come to another one in a little bit. Now, we have sound. And we have the other, we have light. Light, of course, is vibration too, and I guess physically, in a sense, it's a wave but can you see the inner lights? Probably not. Most people cannot. Maybe you get a little flickering, but every so often, God's grace allows us to see that light. But the degree that you're inwardly calm will correlate with the amount of ability to see those inner lights. And so if we can bring calmness into what we're doing, raise our energy up, and calmly approach our spiritual practices with that inner calmness, we'll find that light begins to shine. And how about the quality, the aspect? I think this is the aspect that is, calmness is not highlighted too much. I think the second one that's not highlighted too much is the aspect of power. It's a little understood. And what is that? And the Swamiji defines it, is the ability to command our energies for our personal transcendence and for the transcendence of others. It's said that true power is rooted in pure love, and if that is not calm, obviously our power is dissipated. We lose power when we cannot concentrate, when we cannot focus our own energies and bring them to a point to be able to apply them. And it's important to understand that that inner power is enhanced when we used our energies towards something that's in tune with Dharma. it becomes stronger. And the opposite is also true. To use our inner powers for something that's adharmic, out of tune, ultimately dissipates them, because it's not our power alone through which with which we operate. It's our power. You could say is there's a in the old days, when you wanted to start a big piece of machinery, you would use a little motor to get it started, and the little motor would get it started, and the little pony motor would start the big motor. Well, that's how we are. It's our little motor of our power put in tune opens the door for the larger power to come in. So we can try our best, but if we're not calm, if we don't have that with inner focus, we find that we're not able to attune ourselves to the larger divine power, which is our potential. And so this too, leadership is like that. Leaders who cannot harness power to their thoughts and their ideas, if they don't have that inner force to be able to then summon and inspire other people to actually join in on whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish. And I know this is, I think, one of the secrets that great spiritual leaders, Paramhansa Yogananda, obviously, there was that inner stillness that was there that you just could feel. This is what all his disciples said. He says you could feel the power right behind it. It was there. And it came from that inner stillness, that power that put him in tune with the divine will. And it was the same thing. I saw that in Swamiji. He had a certain magnetic power. It was his magnetism, but it was his magnetism, not egoic. It was his magnetism because he was always intent on being in tune with his guru, and that gave him power. And then, but at the same time, I don't think I ever saw him ruffled. In other words, and he faced tremendous challenges. Occasionally, I saw him get frustrated because, things weren't going right, and he said, and he was sort of like, but it wasn't a sense of being uncalm. It was just that it didn't work. Well, try again. But being restless, mentally restless. And he had this motto. He said, I will not allow anything to take away my peace of mind. And by that, he meant that stillness. And of course, peace being one of the other qualities. Peace and calmness are the other two aspects of God. They're associated together. Peace is said to be a little bit is the result of calmness and that deep inner peace. But I think in a sense they overlap. The calmness and peace, I think you could sort of think of as together. And finally, that last aspect of the eight is bliss, joy. And without calmness, how can there be joy? How can there be bliss? That is the true nature of God, ever existing, ever conscious, ever new. And Swamiji emphasized that bliss is, and it's not a static state, and this is the ever new, it's ever creative, ever new experience of God expressing through his creation. And one adjacent thought is that when we study the yamas and the niyamas, we have that one quality of one niyama of santosha, contentment. And that contentment on the deepest level is having no desire. You could say nothing pulls you out. You're one, you're whole. There's nothing outside of you that is going to take you away. So there's no longing that you're complete. And it's only when we have that completeness of God's presence within us that we gain that contentment. And it's only then can we truly be still. It's only then we can then begin to experience. And they say the power that comes from a contentment is bliss. Now, Swami Sri Yukteswar, his disposition was more wisdom-oriented. And he said that when he was explaining Kriya Yoga, He says Kriya Yoga is like mathematics. It's like an equation. And he says, if we think about it, that's a good analogy, because notice the correlations. When we become, how do we calm? One of the easy ways, what happens, what's one of the manifestations, is if a person's huffing and puffing, assuming they just haven't finished a major race of some sort, but they're sitting there and their breath is disturbed. When we become calm, the breath itself naturally begins to calm itself. And the reverse is true. When we interiorize, the breath becomes calm. If a person says, oh, I'm in samadhi, and they're huffing and puffing, yeah, it's not that way. It's a giveaway right away. So you'll find this correlation. When we consciously calm the breath, we naturally begin to interiorize our consciousness. And this is what we're trying to do. Taking a step back, I should say, yoga is the neutralization of the waves of feeling. As I've mentioned, the waves of likes and dislikes. And what we're trying to do through the practice of Kriya is we're trying to magnetize the spine by using pranayama. We're using the breath to magnetize the spine. And what happens when we magnetize the spine? The magnetic attraction of the spine draws the life force away from the senses, away from perhaps the disturbed senses or the disturbed emotions. And we begin to pull them back into their home in the deep spine. The energy comes into the body, goes through the deep spine, and outwardly expresses in day-to-day activity through the senses and ultimately through the mind and all of the mental processes. When we practice Kriya, what we're trying to do is magnetize the spine and draw that life force through the magnetization of the spine back into the deep spine. This is the process of interiorization. Those of you who have studied the yoga, Raja Yoga system. Well, as that begins to happen, as we interiorize, the breath becomes calm. And you can just practice some basic breathing exercises, and you'll see that as you interiorize, you breathe, do some breathing exercises, you start to become calm. There's a correlation there. I know when I first began public speaking, as most people, and let's say come into this life with a talent in that way, they're a little bit nervous. And so what I was taught or suggested was do some deep breathing. And then you're going to take on a task of any sort. You're a little bit nervous about it. It's a sort of, everybody somewhat knows this. And so you start doing deep breathing, and just that alone calms you. And so there's this correlation. Well, calmness leads to something else. Not only does calmness, it's a result of the breath being calm, but it also leads to being calmness, but it also begins to moderate our likes and our dislikes, our emotional reactions to what's happening outside. It's like mathematics. Calmness leads to a calming of the likes and dislikes. And when you begin to calm the likes and the dislikes, your heart's feelings become calmer, they begin to moderate. And very naturally, as if you're a meditator, and if you practice Kriya Yoga, you begin to disassociate with all those likes and dislikes. You begin to disassociate with the senses. You begin to disassociate with the physical body. This begins to happen as you practice. Now, I'm speaking here to people who are experienced meditators, but you will begin to disassociate with the body. And this leads, as you begin to disassociate with your likes and dislikes, you begin to disassociate with your personality, you begin to disassociate with your ego a little bit. This disassociation leads to a non-attachment to what's going on around you. You're neutral about things. You just become the observer, And you find that the more you disassociate with your attachments, your likes and dislikes, your personality, you begin to disassociate with the body itself. And you begin to watch what's happening. And as the observer, and everything begins to slow down. Now, as this begins to happen, it's an enjoyable feeling. And what that does is it opens the door for you to be able to experience these aspects of God. You begin to be, the door is open for you to experience joy. The door is open for you to experience peace. The door is open, that very calmness that comes is enjoyable in and itself, and you begin to have an experience of freedom. You become, as your non-attachment grows, you become less bound by that. And also, you begin to hear sounds. It's very natural. But we have to disassociate ourselves, attachment to this body, to this breath. All of that begins to happen in a very natural way. But it takes calming in order to bring that about. And you gain the ability to experience what Paramhansa says in his poem, his great poem Samadhi. There's a line in there, he says, I, the cosmic sea, watch the little ego floating in me. It's not that the ego goes away, it's just that we disassociate from it. And in this, when we can learn to do that, a great sense of freedom comes. We're free. And ultimately, of course, temporarily, let's just say we're free in that moment, but we free ourselves from that and the breath itself becomes still. Now practice daily again, and then we come back, and of course meditation's over and we go back into the habitual patterns that we have. But daily immersing ourselves in that sense of freedom, in time, this becomes our reality. And we then and Paramhansa Yogananda used to say, live in the self. Go out as you need to engage in your work, to do your duties, do what needs to be done, and when you're finished, go back into the self. And that's what he was meaning here, I believe. He says, your throne is that position of being associated with the larger reality, that position of freedom, that position of inner centeredness, of inner calmness. It's from that default position, which it becomes, you operate. And you have to go out. And so as Master said, he says, well, you can run calmly, you can run nervously, but to not run when you have to is laziness. And so you do your duty from that position. And you find, but then your home is in that freedom within yourself, and you go back to there, and that's where you rest. And you'll find that in time, of course, that we begin to calm these waves of feeling, and we actually begin to calm the ego attachment that keeps us bound into this body. But I'm not going to go into that one this week. I'm going to come back to that next week and talk about calming the ego of what is really we're after here. But you see, in order to get to the ego, we have to start with the body, start with the breath, start with the mind, start with the likes and dislikes, and all of these are these accoutrements that go along. But as those become calm, we get to the heart of it. What's really the heart of it? It's that ego identity, that ego attachment, and then how can we relieve ourselves of that? And that's what we're going to discuss next week, and how to actually bring about that, what to actually do that might be helpful for this. And I'll suggest a few things. Now, just in preparation for this class, one little exercise which you might want to practice, and then I'll leave it with this, and we'll come back next week and pursue, is that knowing I was going to come here and do this class, I said, well, I need to get centered. And I practiced this for 15 minutes. And you might try this. Well, let me just, I practiced for 15. Why don't you try to see if you can do this for 5 minutes? because we're going to talk a little bit about pranayama next week. It's a basic technique of starting with the breath. Inhale to a count of 4. Inhale. Hold 4. 4 counts, exhale. It's easy. Now you can adjust the number to whatever is comfortable for you. And then I let the breath stay out for 4 counts. And then I inhale 4 counts, nice and deep through the nostrils, keeping good spine. And did it again. Continuously. Do it for 5 minutes. See if you can do it. Have a clock. And then do it for 5 minutes. And see if you don't become calm. Now, while you're doing that, as you inhale, feel you're drawing life force up the spine from the base of the spine, Muladhara, to the point between the eyebrows, holding it there, drawing that life force down the spine, just as you're breathing through with this pranayama, and do that again, just again and again. And as you're doing that, keep the body still, good posture, and very consciously let the tensions go out of your body as you focus at the spirit. You'll begin to look into the spiritual eye, focusing, perhaps maybe even listening to inner sounds, and just practice this. And then when you complete, take a deep breath. You might even tense and relax before doing it. Take a deep breath. Then look up into the light of the spiritual eye and offer yourself into that light. God, Divine Mother, I offer myself wholeheartedly into you. Guide me in everything I do. Let's come back next week and then we'll talk a little bit more of things that you can do to help bring about calmness. Joy to you.